I didn't know that I had symptoms. I was really pushing them off to being a busy mom, having an active lifestyle. I had some shoulder pain. That shoulder pain opened up Pandora's box, but in a good way because, looking back, thank heaven that I had that shoulder pain and that I finally paid attention to my body. My ER physician came in and my son was with me in the room and he said, I think I can't give you a lot of information, but I feel like you have a very large mass on your colon. And I think that you have tumors on your liver. And in a week's time, I went from being a normal mom to a stage 4 cancer patient with 6 months to live. I was a busy mom. I was an active runner, hiker, and we were on a hike one day. And I thought I had fallen into a kind of a rut. We were on gravel, and I noticed the shoulder pain, and the shoulder pain became so intense that I ended up actually in the ER in my small hometown. But ironically, looking back again, like hindsight, right? I definitely had some symptoms. I had went through a huge weight loss. I had been dieting though, and so it kind of coincided with that diet program that I was on. Turns out it was actually the colorectal cancer that was taking over and consuming all of the energy in my body, and I was dropping weight rapidly. I had some cramping and I had some abdominal pain. I didn't have any blood in my stool, which is a typical sign of a late stage diagnosis. I had some skin coloring too, which is a sign of liver problems and liver issues. And I had extensive disease to my liver. My shoulder pain was the beginning of what unfolded into a really, really scary traumatic diagnosis. I went to the ER that day because I just couldn't get over the pain. It was just so excruciating. And, in the ER, they do the basic testing. They do your blood work. My blood work was irregular. And so I'm very fortunate. My ER investigated. My ER doctor said, something's not right. Let's do a little bit more looking. And so in that, we had an ultrasound and a CT scan. And ultimately, through that day, we evolved into looking at different things, my gallbladder, and then ultimately I had spots on my liver, and so my ER physician came in, and my son was with me in the room, and he said, I think I can't give you a lot of information, but I feel like you have a very large mass on your colon. And I think that you have tumors on your liver that are relative to that. And I think that you need to see an oncologist.
Mm.
And at that moment, my son fell on the ground because he heard cancer and life changed. Well, my first thought was my son who was melting because when you hear that word, you don't know anything else, but that's a really scary word, right? Whether it's stage 0, precancer, all the way through, to hear those words is terrifying, traumatic, and he was 18 years old. My first thoughts were of my kids, like, wow, what is going on? My life is normal. I'm a mom. I don't have time for cancer. This can't be happening to me. Tell me how to fix it. Because my kids need their mom. And that drove me really into actions. And I was very fortunate, immediately had a colonoscopy to diagnose, started triaging my family and preparing them for all of the unknowns that are now going to exist in this new life. It was crushing. And in a week's time, I went from being a normal mom to a stage 4 cancer patient with 6 months to live that had a chemo port and maybe was going to need to get her affairs in order. So it was a really, really scary time, and I didn't know what to do with it. I'm a really big advocate of a bazillion opinions. So, like, you have to seek out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, as many as you are comfortable with. And once you have, I always say, once you have all the information and you can make a decision and you are comfortable with the decision based on the information you have, you can go into care with confidence driving your care. I went to an oncologist, my first oncologist. I adored her and I fired her because she told me I had 6 months to live and there was nothing that she could do. And that just wasn't good enough for me. because I had 4 children and they were not going to lose their mom. And so I was in Ohio. A friend of mine who is a physician told me, if you're going to fight this and you're going to fight hard, you're stacked against some really heavy odds, and the best place for you is Cleveland Clinic. I was fortunate that my surgeon told me and was honest with me about the severity of my situation. She said, I can take care of your colon. Your liver is a little terrifying. My liver was covered with disease on both sides, and I had a very, very complex tumor in the ball of the hepatic arc, which no one wanted to look at. And Cleveland Clinic had our first bit of hope, and that was, let's do chemo and see what happens, and maybe we could do a surgical intervention. And that was the first time I had ever heard we could take this cancer out of you. Before that, I had just heard, you have 6 months to live, you need to get your affairs in order. So I clung on to that hope. I clung on to that hope that I could fight really hard through 12 rounds of chemo and I could get there, and I did. I got there. The glimmer, right? It's a mindset, definitely. I think that I can't tell you that there are not dark, dark times where I just wanted to curl up into a ball, because I absolutely did. And I allowed that. I found space for that. I gave myself the grace to have that, to have those dark, fearful times, because I couldn't empower myself to have the hope and to have the light if I didn't allow the space for the fear. And I think sometimes we forget that fear's okay. Because for me, fear drove me, and it drove the hope. I was scared that something could happen. So that drove me to fight even harder for the opposite effect, to get the hope, to make it to the next thing. So treatment plan started out, we were going to do 12 rounds of chemo, which we did. And after the chemotherapy, we would look at the result and determine what the next steps were. And we did that. And I became a surgical candidate after 12 rounds of chemotherapy. And so we took a 3-stage approach to my liver and to my colon. It was a pretty complex situation. The first surgery was the tumor removal in the colon. And then the second and third surgeries were, they went in and they worked on my liver. They took out my right lobe in the first surgery. The second surgery, they went in and removed that really complex tumor that was on my hepatic arc. And there were 4 more tumors on my on my left lobe. So in those next 2 surgeries, we dealt with all of those things. And then the final surgery, prior to long-term care, was I was in a clinical trial and received the HAI pump. I received the chemotherapy through the HAI pump to clean up and mop up what might be discovered later. We call it residual disease in my liver, what was left of my liver, which was my left lobe. I was really fortunate when I was diagnosed. When we talked about me being diagnosed late stage, we looked at the genealogy and genetics and biomarkers right away, something that now in my job we focus on, because a lot of those components aren't put into place right away. But for me and my family, right away, we knew we needed to look at our hereditary risk. So I have juvenile polyposis syndrome, and that is an early predisposition to advanced polyps and more polyps in your colon. The syndrome is caused from a mutation in a genetic DNA marker called BMPR1A. That's my mutation, the one that my children and my sister also have. My dad died when I was 5 in a car accident. And so we didn't have the knowledge, and knowledge is power. And so we did genetic testing on my children. We did colonoscopies for everybody for Christmas. But we determined through biomarker testing, through hereditary marker testing, and through colonoscopies, that first we could prevent my kids, from ever having cancer. And secondly, we identified that my son is a carrier of the gene that could cause early polyposis and polyps. And secondly, we discovered through colonoscopy that my sister had stage 1 cancer. And so we were able to catch it really early. So those critical pieces of, the pieces of diagnosis started right away for me. My dad was a carrier of the gene that I have. I'm a genetic cancer. And so empowering myself really helped me overcome the why me's and the sense of shame that it came with not knowing and not seeing the signs. Just being able to help my kids and knowing that, they're at risk, and being able to save their lives is, that's, my job as a mother is to protect them. So I was able to overcome a lot of those fears just by knowing that I could equip them with the power to not be me. Cleveland gave us such hope that the cancer wasn't going to come back, and I was NED, and we were celebrating. We were on this really big high, and we started making plans again, not in 3-month increments like we had been doing. And so things were starting to kind of feel a little bit normal again. Like, kids are doing good. We're starting to make plans. Like, life was starting to happen again. But we didn't know we were in for another blow. About 6 months later, I started having some really interesting liver enzymes number, which is something that an oncology team tracks through the years. And my CT scans were clear, but my liver started not wanting to cooperate. And unfortunately, I ended up in liver failure. So I had been clear of disease, and now was in the hospital in liver failure. And so when we were at this very big high of, oh my gosh, mom's going to be okay, and like, we're going to survive this, and we're going to get through this trauma, and we're going to celebrate, again, we were crippled with, now I need a liver transplant. And now the fears just all came back again. And here we sat, not knowing what to do, and again had lost hope. We had all this hope energy, and we were back to that dark place. My oncologist and my liver surgeon had come in. I had been in Cleveland. I had a liver aneurysm because my liver was struggling to keep up. And he said, I have always fought for the next thing for you, and I've always had something in my back pocket to do next. And he said, I'm out of things in my back pocket. I don't have anything left. But that glimmer of hope popped in right there. And that's where I always cling to. The glimmer of hope was, you're probably not going to make it in this traditional form, but my colleague is doing translational research in liver transplant, and you're the perfect candidate. Now, mind you, I was in liver failure, and I just overcome this cancer diagnosis. But he said, you're the perfect candidate, and I'd like to do this. When they asked me about it, I said yes immediately. And I said, what do I need to do? And he said, well, you need to find a donor. And I was like, what do you mean? I don't even understand. So I was crippled with dying, one, and also now I had to be my own advocate again, and I had to go and find a donor. And so, my kids were asking everyone was asking everyone. I lived in a really small community, and everyone knew my plight. And my pastor came to me and said, I think we should put a note in the bulletin at church, because people understand what's going on. And so we did just that. 50 people called the clinic and gave their information to be a donor. And Jason knew the minute that he opened that bulletin that he was the person that was supposed to be my donor, and he was my donor. But I'm very fortunate. I have Jason's left lobe now, and he has his right lobe, and I have him and his family as dear friends, and I have my life, and I have my children. And now I get to do all the things that, I didn't think I was going to do 10 years ago. I thought that I was not going to see them do any of the things. I thought that I was going to have to prepare them for living without me. And now I'm very, very lucky that I now get to live with them. That girl, Carol, was her name 10 years ago. Lots of pieces of her came along for the ride. And we landed 10 years later as Caroline after cancer. She's a lot better version. She's softer. She's braver. A lot of people think that soft and brave can't coexist, but they can. And I learned that I could be both of those things. Old Carol She didn't know how to do both of those things. Caroline is more equipped to be in the present, and live life now, and be present and not look so much to the future, which I think is completely okay as well. I really immediately was thrust into, I got to do more. I need to find community. I was alone, and I was alone in my thoughts, and so I just dug in to the web. I was WebMDing way too much, and so I needed to meet community, and I needed to meet people that were like me, so that I could learn how to do work to help others. I'd become an advocate helping myself and learning how to ask questions appropriately. But then I became encouraged to be an advocate for others, because everyone deserves the same care that I received. And that led me to Fight CRC and their call on Congress. So my role at Fight CRC is community engagement. So I am really fortunate to get to work with the community. We do a lot of work educating our community from prevention all the way through to, long-term survivorship. And I really am so incredibly honored and filled with gratitude that I get to have that space. I get to people, I get to learn about their stories. I get to connect them with the right resources, with the right hope, with the right people that can uplift them, just like happened to me. My first message to every single woman listening is, we belong at the top. And that is not a selfish thing. Please, all the ladies in the house, listen to me loud and clear. If we're not at the top, then nothing else can be successful. So we have to be selfish. We own that spot. We get to be on the top. Everything else falls together. I didn't know that. The opposite effect was happening to me. So the most important thing is to be on the top. If we're on the top of that pyramid, everything else falls into place, because we're going to say, oh gosh, I'm not feeling the best. I'm really tired. I have a bellyache all the time after I eat. I have blood in my stool. Those are things that if we're putting ourselves on the top, we're going to seek out attention. We're going to seek out care. Prevention and screening is the most important thing. You have to know it to screen it to beat it. If you know about your family history, if there's a cancer in your history of your family, you need to ask about it. You need to have a conversation with your doctor. It's really important. And it's an easy conversation. If you have a symptom, you need to ask questions. You need to get screened. And if you don't have the right access to the opportunity, seek advocacy out. There's so many organizations that exist that are willing to help you and can guide you through what that looks like to be screened and what modalities of screening tools are available to you. So 100% seek out care. And then finally, know your body. Like, just trust yourself, trust your gut, know your body, and screen it. That way, you prevent cancer. Amidst all of it, hope floats. It's a true thing, and you have to cling on to it. As hard as it may be in the dark spaces, I sat there. I see everyone that sits there. Call me, email me, seek out people like you and, the Survivor Network. We exist. We're there to help you find that hope, because it does exist even in the dark places. And I just want to encourage everybody that it will be okay.